So just to add a personal touch to today's programming, I'm a very proud alum of Medgar Evers and a wonderful institution where I completed my BSW in 2020. And I must say, I think I've always loved social work because of the many hats that we are all able to wear. We're in a profession where we can work with all types of populations. We can follow any interest that we may have, no matter at what stage we are in our lives. So I want to highlight that when we are up here reading people's bios, when you are on break or after the programming and we start networking, if we can all highlight the multiple hats that we wear, as well as the intersections that we have of being a social worker, but also a mother, son, father, whatever those hats might be that you identify as. And the next person who's going to come up and moderate our next panel is a perfect example of that. She wears many hats, and she has worn many hats throughout her career. She was previously a psychotherapist at the Center for Psychotherapy right here in Brooklyn. She was also the program coordinator for the Community Partnership Program of East New York. She's also worked in substance abuse and prevention and intervention for the SPARK program at John Adams High School. She's also worked in providing young adults with supportive services at the Harlem Congressions for Community Improvement program. And she currently volunteers as a chairperson for the Your Body is a Temple Health Ministry in the Siloam Presbyterian Church of Brooklyn, New York. She's currently the director of Life Guide, LCSWPC, providing mental health services in the New York City area. And we're honored today to have her moderate the Understanding Trauma Across the Life course for the youth and young adults. Please help me in welcoming Eva Gordon.
And I want to thank Dr. Sullivan for her work today. Thank you so much for racial trauma and how it impacts. As a psychotherapist, I see it every day with my clients. And I do bring up our culture because it's part of our healing process to bring our culture in as our framework. Okay. So I'm introduce our panelists for today, and then we'll get rolling with our lovely vignette on who's our client. Our client today is Kate. But before we get started with Kate and her grandmother, our topic is of trauma across the life course, youth and young adults. And like many of us who know what's happening in our world today, how COVID impacted many of our lives. COVID did not start the problem, it exacerbated the problems we have in our community, right? It didn't create racism, it just tore off the Band-Aid on a stab wound. So our panelists for today, who I have? I see Kenald Bernard.
Yes.
Yes. And am I saying it right? Okay. Kenald Bernard is a dedicated licensed clinical social worker offering comprehensive life coaching and counseling services. His professional journey began with NYC Children's Services, where he served as a CPS specialist, gaining invaluable experience in preventing services, law enforcement, collaboration, and family court judiciary system. Thank you, Kenald, for your work.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone.
Next we have, let me see, I'm not in order here, but I'm patient with myself here. Okay, next we have Shirley de Peña, PhD. Dr. de Peña is a dedicated professional committed to fostering success and well-being, particularly among foster youth in academic setting. Currently serving as the director of Foster Youth College Success Initiative at the City University of New York. She brings over 20 years of invaluable experience in her role. She's empowering foster youth at CUNY, ensuring they not only navigate the challenges of college life, but thrive academically. Her approach involves personalized support, both individually and in a small group settings, with the goal of enhancing retention and graduation rates. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone.
And next we have Melissa Elliott. Yes? Okay. She is the founder and CEO of Agape Family Therapy and Coaching, a group private practice serving New Yorkers in maternal mental health, family therapy, group counseling, and national and international coaching clients, consultation and corporate wellness, and employee engagement and leadership development, as well. Thank you so much for your work.
Good morning, everyone.
Last but not least, Durrell Washington, PhD candidate, a native New Yorker from the Bronx. Durrell Malik Washington Sr. is an abolitionist social worker, a PhD candidate at the University of Chicago School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. His current dissertation is a narrative study that investigates how a period of juvenile incarceration shapes Black family life in the United States through the perspective of siblings formerly incarcerated Black boys and girls. Thank you so much for your work.
Good morning.
How are we doing on time here? Okay, perfect. Okay, now, for our discussion today, we're gonna look at Kate and Grandma, okay? And our process will be, we're gonna focus on 6 questions about the vignette. It should be in your folder. And then I'm gonna do a little Q&A with you guys. And I'm gonna highlight some of the points of our vignette for all of us to focus on for today. And then I'm gonna take 2 audience members to answer each question, then have our panelists respond with your expertise to give the students real-life experience. The goal of the conference is to really connect students with professionals before you graduate. So when you get out in the real world, you know how to handle yourself, because everything's not taught in the classroom. I wish it was, but it's not. So our family today for our treatments and service planning. Kate is a 12-year-old girl who attends middle school, is in the 6th grade. She's been with her grandmother, placed with grandma since she was a baby, pretty much. And we realized that Kate's behavior changed when her sister, her middle sibling, came to live with her and grandma recently. And there's a struggle with her adjusting to living with her sister and grandma's placement. And we see her behavior turning volatile with outbursts, and which carries over into her schoolwork as well. So we see her having problems with sleeping and not able to focus, and she's also irritable as well. And she has diagnosis of ODD, ADHD, yet no IEP as yet. But we know that her grandmother, Kate's grandma, has some also trauma of her own from childhood, which then creates some depression and overwhelmed feelings for grandma as well. We know that the history of trauma comes when Kate was a baby, her parents were involved with CPS due to neglect, physical abuse between the parents, also substance abuse as well with the parents. And Kate's mom tells CPS that there's stress between her and dad due to abuse between the both of them, where mom has a hard time consoling Kate as a baby, which then could impact how mom bonds with the baby as well. Little overview of that, okay? To read a little bit more, I'm gonna get into the questions in 2 minutes. We wanna move rapidly, but yet in a good manner, okay? So as we finish reading, look at the questions. And I think in terms of our work today with our discussion is we really want to understand trauma, right? We talked about trauma with Dr. Sullivan earlier and how trauma impacts service delivery, how it impacts grandma actually receiving care, Kate receiving care, and how the professionals can help this family. So put on your caseworker hat, your therapist hat, put on your, who else is involved? Caseworkers.
Social worker.
CPS, social worker hat. And we're gonna get to work with helping out Kate and grandma and the sister. Okay, so students and those attending in the audience, the first question I have for you is, what emotional dysregulations could Kate be experiencing from the trauma? I'll take 2 people who wanna answer that question from the audience first. Who's ready to answer? Anybody? Okay, give you 2 minutes to gather your thoughts.
We can start.
Wonderful, let's get the ball rolling. So who wants to start first in terms of what you're seeing? You wanna keep the ball rolling, who wants to start first?
So I just want to say something. Do I need this?
Yeah,
I generally
yeah,
don't
yeah,
need
yeah.
microphones. Good morning, everyone. So one of the things that I noticed about this, the case vignette that I hoped would frame our conversation as well, is that what's missing from the vignette, and this may have been done purposefully, but what's missing from the vignette is the race, ethnicity of the family of the client.
Good question.
And I think we need to lay that on top of whatever we're talking about, because we can talk about trauma, and then when we talk about trauma for people of color, we're talking about something else. Right? We can talk about trauma, but when we talk about trauma for people who identify as of color or LGBTQ, that we're talking about something else. And so I want us to make sure that we never forget that there's a piece that's missing and that we need to think about. This could be a white family. Doesn't mean that race, class, power, and privilege does not impact this family because they're white. And if it's a family of color, it will also impact them, yet in a different way. And so one of the things that I think about in terms of what might be happening for this young girl, we're talking about a 12-year-old, which we know in general, 12-year-old girls are crazy. I have an 11-year-old who's going to be 12 in July, and I'm not ready. So just by itself, being 12 is so hard in this world.
Yes, yes.
Because of all of the things that come with developmentally with being 12.
Yes.
Being 12 and having to deal with trauma, being 12 with someone who's experienced trauma from a young age and who's a girl of color. Amaya, our wonderful speaker, talked about a young girl in a setting where she's the only one. If you are then 12 and the only one in your class that looks like you, that is a layer of trauma. And so I just think that when we talk about what she's experienced, we know about the substance use, we know about the physical abuse, we know about the interruptions in moving from this house to that house, from school to school, and she's 12. So I just want us to bring all of that into all of these questions. How does race, class, power, and privilege impact this family? So I'll stop there.
Do you
For
want
now.
to speak? Thank you,
sure.
Doctor.
Yeah, I usually don't use mics as well. But
use
so
the
I
mic,
read
use the
this is a black family. Like, I study black families on purpose. I don't study other families, and no slight to anyone who does. But I read this as if Kate was coming from a black family, how I kind of think about it. And kind of as far as her emotional dysregulation, I think about some of the work that I use in like family systems theory, but basically kind of this concept called family boundary ambiguity, which is not really understanding what her role is. Like, is her role to be the child? Is her role to be her own provider and those kind of things? So I think there's a lot of role confusion. I also think the fact that like siblings, and ironic that I study siblings, I don't think this was done on purpose, but that's one of the first relationships that we build, one of the first bonds, in kind of the first person you can feel like you can trust. And to kind of not have her sister there and then plays back with her where she probably wasn't already getting the attention that she deserved, because her grandmother's also dealing from trauma, right? And if her grandmother's dealing with trauma, she was separated from her parents. And I'm not sure if the grandparent is from the dad or the mom, but they probably suffer from trauma as well because the grandparent experienced it. So this is just kind of, it has this cascading and this ripple effect that's now brought on kind of by Kate. And the qualitative research in me had a million questions. I'm wondering the kind of, why did CPS take her? What kind of supports did her parents actually have? Like, was it that they were being punished for being a poor black family rather than getting them the supports they needed in order to take care of their daughter? And then also, did they notice the issues that the grandmother was going through before placing her there? Right? Like, you want to stay with your family and things like that. So I had a lot of unanswered questions, but I think emotionally, one, she's 12 years old. So I feel like, I have a 10-year-old and he's growing into his own and wants to do his own thing and doesn't want to kind of like, he listens, but, I feel like with young people, they have a voice and they know what they want. And we need to do a better job as the adults at actually listening for a second, taking a step back and listening. Yes, we may know better, but she may be letting the grandparent know what she needs. And she's just not able to give it to her, so she's starting to kind of detach and kind of trying to figure out her role within the family, but has all these unanswered questions because she may also don't want to build the bond, because when she builds bonds, they take her away. Like, CPS has done it. So what does it look like to every time you build some kind of a relationship that the ties are severed in those things? So I think it's just a lot of confusion, which is a lot for a 12-year-old to also, as everyone has said, since we started the program, living in a hyper-racialized society.
Okay, so before we move on, because we have people on Zoom, use the microphone.
Okay.
They
Okay.
can't hear you guys,
Okay.
so we've got to use
Gotcha.
the microphones.
Gotcha.
And as we're doing, so we're going to have all the panelists speak first, then we'll have Q&A. So you have index cards on the table to write down questions and be answered by the panelists after we go through the 6
Okay.
questions to cover the vignette.
Awesome.
Okay, so the first question we covered on 12-year-old being a 12-year-old, right? That's part of the emotional part of this regulation, because we know that puberty impacts a person's mental health, correct? That's a big part of it. And then grandma as well, so bonding with the 12-year-old for grandma. It's not her mother, so there's a generation gap that impacts bonding, correct? Grandma raised her kids already, so now raising a 12-year-old for grandma is hard too. Second question, what attachment issues could kid experience from the neglect, physical abuse, and substance misuse? Ms. Elliott, want to tackle that question?
I think, as has been mentioned, when I think about this case, I think about the intergenerational trauma. I also think about mom. I think about what has occurred with her and the lack of attachment and the organizations that have come and ripped this child from their mother and from their parents without giving adequate support. Oftentimes, I was trained in mandated reporting. I learned about mandated support, really getting into figuring out what the community, what the parents need, having the parents be an expert in their lives, and knowing and moving from developing goals through that lens. When we think about the attachment of this child, as mentioned, it has been severed from mom, from dad. Dad is not even in the picture anymore. And we don't know what has happened to him. And that, from a social work standpoint, that's a disservice. Because how have we not given support to our fathers? What is this child learning about the connection between fathers and mothers and grandparents? And I think those are the things that we take on intergenerationally, and it gets passed down through systems, through families. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Kenald, did you want to add to that? I mean, it was answered well, but anything you want to add as far as attachment-wise?
Well, I wanted to add, when it comes to the trauma that she's experiencing, we could see that it's complex because we have that dysregulation going on with her emotions. I work in a middle school, so she sounds like one of my students already, so I connected with this vignette instantly. So when it comes to it, the engagement with the family and maybe the school in this case is important. I think it kind of goes into the next question,
Yes,
but
exactly.
I was going to say that something that I notice is she has ADHD and she has oppositional defiance, and she doesn't have an IEP. So that means that she may not be receiving any services in the school to help her balance and regulate. I know a lot of students that I work with, they have one-on-one sessions, they have group sessions to unpack. We have trauma groups to unpack what they're going through. So when it comes to the IEP, that's important for them to get those. Now, if they don't have an IEP, is she getting what we call building supports? So that could be services prior to, like, what's the diligence that the school is giving. Now, working in a school, I see that when we face issues with students who might be problematic, with the defiance, talking back, not going to class, we always lean on the caretakers. But at the same time, we expect the caretakers to have this magic wand to have this child's behavior change. It may come from the home or the experience, but at the same time, it takes collaboration. And that's where, in my school, I know that, I'm a big advocate, as she mentioned about fathers, I'm a big advocate for involving the fathers. I know as an active father, I barely get any calls from the school. And they know exactly what I do for a living, and I make it clear, and they still don't reach out to me. They'll say, "Where's mom?" And even when they're talking in meetings in my school, they say, "We need to call mom instead of the parents." And we have to, make sure that we integrate that, because it's just as much as the father's responsibility as it is the mother's. So with this young lady, I also see that she has, this issue of connectedness that's going on. So I'm not connected to my sister. I was removed at 18 months. I probably didn't receive that, Erickson trust and mistrust stage 1. I didn't get that. The love and belonging is missing. So she's probably going through something that's called thwarted belongingness, where she's not getting that connection. And that could lead to depression. That leads to anxiety. So, all of those different variables for a 12-year-old to face and feeling alone, that could be overwhelming.
Yes. Thank you so much. So you answered both questions very, very well. But one thing about academic services, you said one-on-one services. The IEP is important. And Kate can go to the IEP conference, yes, because she's 12, right? So we have to involve the children in that as well with academics. And advocacy for parents to be involved, not just mom, but we have to include the fathers. And I did work with parent services for years, and father involvement is key in child safety. It's key in mental health, so we have to keep that in mind as well. And Kenald, you mentioned also building supports in the school as well for academic support. So what's in the school? Some schools have CBOs in the schools, I believe, provide that mental health support in the school, and the psychologists and social workers to impact the IEP as well. Okay, let's go into grandma. We hear about grandma. How did grandma's childhood trauma impact, or is it impacting her ability to support and care for Kate and her sibling? Who wants to go first with that? Yes,
Can I
Shirley.
take that one?
Yes, please, yes.
So again, one of the things that I think about when we're talking about this family is if grandma is a woman of color, if grandma's you also mentioned, intergenerational trauma. We've also mentioned grandma coming from a different generation, because we're talking about a grandmother and a 12-year-old. So the ways in which we've communicated grandma's growing up and this 12-year-old now is worlds different.
Yes.
At this point. So even learning how to communicate with each other is problematic. But I think about if grandma has a history of trauma, if mom and dad had a history of substance use, if there was domestic violence in the family, what help did this family receive before this 12-year-old was even conceived? Mm-hmm. Right? What did we look, when we looked at grandma, when we looked at mom, when we looked at dad, did anyone say, here are people who are struggling and need support and need help? And we know the answer to that. Unfortunately, for many of our families of color, they don't receive the help that they get. I think it's unfortunate. A lot of times, we talk about mothers and we talk about this maternal instinct that you're supposed to have the moment that baby is born, and that is not true. And so there are these expectations that are put on women. There are expectations that are put on women of color that they can't ask for help, right? Substance use, we still see as a personal choice and a personal problem that people have. And so we don't help them because they're not worthy, because they chose a substance over their family. And so I look at all of this unresolved health issues for the family that absolutely we can now see there's no way that they can communicate with this young girl now. There's no way that they can take care of her. There's no way that they could have adequately attached to this young girl because they're not well themselves. And so how are we supporting the folks that are supposed to be raising our children if we're not providing them adequate health care, equitable health care, mental health care, and so on and so forth? So that's what...
Thank you. Melissa, you want to add? I see your head shaking. Go on.
Yeah, I definitely want to add, because it speaks to the inequities that we see in every institution that we are part of as people of color. This speaks to the healthcare industry. This speaks to the education industry. This speaks to our personal biases that we come into this work with, that we need to check and be reflective of as social workers, how we look at people who are in front of us, how we view them, what we say when they're not in front of us, how we talk about them when we're with our colleagues. We really need to shift this mindset to really see that these people are human beings, as we talked earlier about us coming from this mindset of chattel slavery. We ourselves have internalized that, and we need to shift that in the profession in order to adequately and equitably serve our people.
Thank you so much to Shirley and Melissa. I just want to culminate and kind of summarize.
I wanted to add
Oh, no,
something
please.
too,
Yes,
if
yes,
you
go
don't
on.
mind. So, bringing it back to the grandmother, I also wanted to share that just her being the grandmother, I know that possibly she's not accepting services as, her willingness to accept services may not be as apparent as someone who's younger, right? So we have her who probably didn't have a social worker around her in her home or, in her schools. I just came from a career day yesterday at my school, and I ran into a buddy that I grew up with. He said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm one of the social workers in the school." He said, "I didn't even have a social worker." And we grew up, he went to a different school, but I didn't even know who the social worker was in my school. So, I would say that, when it comes to accepting services, it's tough for people, because that stigma is still there. If I say that I'm accepting services, something's wrong with me.
Yes.
I do not want to face the trauma that I had as a child. I am putting it, in the back of my mind. I'm ignoring that it's happening. And I'm assuming that this grandmother doesn't have the skills, the parental skills, not even the parental skills, but the communication skills to help her granddaughter. She definitely wants to help her granddaughter, making herself available, but she probably doesn't understand how to help her redirect her, emotions, how to cope, different techniques, how to give her space, those little things that can make a big difference.
Thank you all so much. Before we move on to our other question, as you write your questions down, raise your hand to have your card collected by volunteers, so we can have a thoughtful Q&A for another 2 minutes from now. Okay. So I think we spoke about question 5, about the treatment and support given to Kate. No, we actually did not get there yet. So what treatment that we need for Kate is what? What does it look like to give Kate support to assist in her trauma history, and how could Kate benefit from that support?
Yeah, I can start. So I think one thing I think about, like, a highly skilled family therapist, like, we need to re-engage Kate with mom, and if they can find dad and grandma. But specifically, I think everyone needs individual counseling as well as group counseling. But we're going to focus on Kate here. So I think with her is, I know in kind of a lot of DI trainings, especially ones I've done in like grad school, they do kind of this fishbowl activity, right? Where someone's in the center, they get to speak freely, no one interrupts, no one inputs their thoughts. And I think Kate needs to be able to express herself in front of her family without kind of any interjections, any internalizations of what she's saying. And I go back to, like, this question on like education, like Kate seems to love art, right? We know for most people who do art, they express their feelings and things that they're going through their artwork. So how do you utilize her skills? Like, even like with this question around education, it's like, as most of us are maybe professors or whatever. I know one model doesn't fit all, right? Like, one thing I try to do as an instructor is I take the first couple of weeks to learn like my students' strengths and weaknesses, and then I adapt my lessons based on that, right? So some people, they want me to lecture. I hate lecturing. Like, I love to be an involved conversation, but some need it. Some need group work and all those kind of things. And I think kind of to learn about what Kate's strengths are and utilize those in the therapeutic kind of model, I think would be very beneficial. So I think they need like a generalist approach. Like, I know some people, they specialize in like CBT, EMDR, and those kind of things, but one size doesn't fit all when it comes to that. Like, and especially when you're talking about like Black families. So I think someone who is skilled in different approaches and can adapt as they go along. And, I think is kind of would be the best service, and definitely addressing kind of the historical roots of where this trauma stems from grandma, because I also see this in my work when it comes to the elders. They don't talk about the issues a lot. Like you were saying, like, grandma may not be open to having services because, maybe where she comes from, like, she either relies on, it could be religion silence and those kind of things. You don't show kind of weakness, air quotes, I say that. And then, but I feel like in this generation, talking about things it's a lot more, people are a lot more open to doing so.
Yes, Melissa, yes.
I also want to say that back in my preventive days at Southern Brooklyn Family Services Jewish Board, one thing that I have kept that I keep going and back to as an intervention is the family team conferences.
Yes, very important.
And those
Very
family team
important.
conferences, you bring in everybody that is a social support to that family. That could be a pastor, that could be a rabbi, that could be grandma, that could be auntie, that could be the friend, the neighbor down the block, down the next apartment. And you bring them at a table and we talk about the strengths of the family. We talk about what's going well. What do you love about this child? What do you love about mom and dad? And then you break that down. What are the concerns?
Right.
Tell us how do you view it? How do you view it? And then we come up with a brainstorming activity to see what hits. What are some solutions that can help support this family? And we tasked it, right? Who's going to do what, when, how are we going to come back to this and look to see how we have improved or what barriers are particularly in place. That is highly effective because it gets everybody at the table. Everybody has a say, and we're able to concretely address everybody's needs at that table when facilitated efficiently.
Can I add
Yes,
something?
please, yes.
So Melissa stole a little bit of what I was going to say. Back in my preventive days, across a couple of boroughs in the Bronx, in the preventive program at the Jewish Board, one of the things that I learned, and I want to say this also because I know we have social workers in the room, and I know we have budding social workers in the room. And one of the things that for me stems from those times when we were in preventive, Melissa and I were in preventive around-ish the same time, a little bit older. One of the things that we were told out loud and not so out loud is that we were not clinical, we were not clinicians, we were not clinical staff. We all had our masters, we all had our licenses, but we were not viewed the same as those that worked in the outpatient mental health clinics. And that has stuck with me for a long time because we worked in child welfare, we worked with families that were traumatized. And so in addition to what Melissa's talking about, I think the other thing that I think about is the case management that this family needs.
Yes.
And hear me when I say case management is clinical work.
Yes.
Case management is clinical work. And I have to say this because clinical work is engagement. Clinical work is understanding trauma. Clinical work is understanding behavior and how all of those things together, how race, class, power, and privilege impact people. That is clinical work, and I can do that in McDonald's. So I don't need a clinic, I don't need a hospital to do that work. And so what this family also needs is the case management services. This young girl needs her IEP now.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely unacceptable that she is failing in most of her courses. She has 2 diagnoses that literally impact her ability to do her academic work, and no one has said, we need to do an IEP yesterday.
Yeah.
And this is also part of the system, the educational system that treats children of color differently if this family is of color, but even if she were white. It is unacceptable that this child is not doing well academically, and those services have not been put in place. She needs that because for her to be able to sit in a room with her family and talk about what she needs to be built up. And she can be built up in the ways that some of my colleagues have said, but she can also be built up by seeing that she is not less than, that she is not lacking because she's not doing well in school. And we know that that is what happens. When these young kids do not do well in school, they internalize that. I'm stupid, I'm wrong, I'm this, and I'm that. And if you add the layers of race, class, power, and privilege, she internalizes that even more. So she needs her IEP so she can see that she is worthy and that she is smart and that she is great, just like every other kid in her school. And that, I think, will also elevate some of the stuff that's going on.
Okay.
They said a lot.
Yes,
right
they
there,
did.
But I just
And
want to
we'll go
just
into
put a little
Q&A after
icing or the cherry on
Yes,
top.
yes.
And I think that she would benefit also from something that could provide her hope. So whether it's her or her grandmother, they have some hopelessness, which is one of the key indicators of depression.
Correct.
And something that we could add would be something like a mentor and a strategic mentor for her. And that mentor or big sister, that could be someone who looks similar to her, who could show her like, this is where you could possibly go. This is light at the end of the tunnel. Because I can't imagine being placed at 18 months with your, and estranged from your parents for all these years. Where's your hope at this point? So you need that connection. And that could also help the grandmother, who now could feel more hopeful as well. As she's feeling overwhelmed, you get a break. You get this person who could take her out for a couple of hours, do certain things, and you get a break as a grandparent.
Thank you all so much. For our panelists, thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes for Q&A. So do we have index cards or questions from the audience? Okay. Can you bring them up and we can get the ball rolling? And we want to have time for, start bringing them up. Don't wait. Give me the cards now. Yep, come on. Gotta go. Just bring them up front. I want to get us rolling. Thank you so much. Okay, all right. Okay, are they both similar? Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna make sure they're all not the same. Okay, big one. Okay, so in your roles, how are you addressing stigma around mental health treatment? I'll take 2 people because our time is short. So who wants to address how you are addressing stigma around mental health treatment in your roles?
I'll start.
Yes.
I'll share a little story. So there was, we have to do as school social workers a social history, and that's where you pretty much doing a psychosocial with either the parent and the child. So this child had IEP services, and then the mother and father, family's intact. The father was for the IEP services. The mother was not truly for the IEP services, but she didn't understand that IEP was AKA special education. So once they moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, she found out that her child was receiving special education. She removed him immediately, requested for the services to be discontinued. The father didn't want to go against his wife, so he followed with her and wanted to see how the son was going to do. A year went by and he's been struggling. And, the irony was, although his IEP was removed, he was still in the same setting as if he had the IEP. But they weren't giving him direct services. So he was struggling with it. So it reached a point where the dad finally won the battle of discussion in the home and they revisited IEP services. The psychologist in the building was not too happy of seeing their paper come back. I guess it was probably a rough conversation at that CSE when they removed it initially. So she was like, I don't know why the parents want it back. I had to explain to them that it was a misunderstanding. She didn't understand what her son was receiving, despite him receiving it for several years. Now that they moved, they had to revisit this service, and now she's understanding it more clearly. So when I had them sit down for this social history, I had to take my time to explain to her the pros of the IEP. She felt that he wasn't going to graduate with the proper diploma, and the kids were going to ridicule him and things of that nature. And I provided her some reassurance how all of those things she's concerned about will be addressed, and that's not truly happening. So working with breaking down the stigma, you have to educate the parents. That's the biggest thing to do. And as you educate them on it, they begin to buy in. Even for therapy. Therapy is often, hey, go to therapy. When I sit down for the first session with youth, they don't even know what therapy is. I have to break it down, and I talk to them about something that's relatable. Like, you could go to the gym and you might have a trainer, and that trainer will assist you. You may have these, exercises that you think you know how to do, but I'm going to help you with the form. I'm going to teach you new exercises. And from there, once you get your gains, I can step back and step away, and you will be doing it on your own. And when I break it down to them like that, they absorb it better. So it's about simplifying it and educating, whoever is receiving the services.
Thank you so much. Going to move on to the next question because time is running out. Next question. In the case of Kate, we discussed her supports and social support. Would Kate identify her supports or with her grandmother, and why?
Say that.
Okay, so I guess they're asking, would Kate identify her own social supports or would her grandmother do it for her? Melissa, you want to?
I think it depends on like the services that's provided. Like, I would hope Kate would be able to identify what her supports are, but then also there could be a conversation with grandma, right? But they could be seeing it from two different ways. Like, grandma could see herself as a support, but as Kate was saying, she felt alienated, like the sister was getting more attention and those kind of things. I think it depends.
And I would just add to that, I think it's both. Kate will identify her supports because we want to, in a trauma-informed way, give her voice and choice, as well as grandma, to have that say at the table.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Next question. What programs does your agency specifically offer that can support a family like Kate's? Who wants to address?
Say that one more time.
Okay, what programs does your agency specifically offer that can support a family like Kate's? I know you do, Melissa, in your
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just right up my alley. So we provide, at Agape Family Therapy and Coaching, we provide, actually, we're having a father's group initiative coming up in April, as well as we provide, through the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, maternal mental health support for the families that are impacted by perinatal and postnatal anxiety and depression. We also provide individual counseling, and that we do assess for intimate partner violence, substance abuse, and we do support those families to be, and to the point around stigma. We do a lot of psychoeducation. We do work with psychiatrists and doctors. We really take a collaborative approach because we want, one, to educate, be collaborative, and also share information have them share information amongst each other so that they realize that the power is within themselves and not just the people that they're coming to, that we are a vast amount of social supports, and they don't get it just from one place, but they can get those information from a variety of different sources as well.
Thank you very much. This next question might have been answered by Kenald, I think, earlier. They asked about what about schools that give support and kids and parents that do not allow for help? And they asked about people who don't believe in medication for mental health treatment. So I think you addressed it in terms of educating the family about what an IEP is, defining psychotherapy, educate the family about what is medication for if needed. Isn't always needed medication. So educate the parents and kids about what is IEP, what is psychotherapy, what is medication, and have a conversation about it and keep it simple. That's very important. Yes, please, yes.
Medication becomes a big discussion. Schools like medicated kids, and parents don't like to medicate their kids. Mm-hmm. So, what I talk to the parents about is, educating themselves around the alternative. So ADHD is usually like the most popular diagnosis that people get medication for, right? And it's also overdiagnosis in ADHD.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
It's reached a point, now with COVID, it unmasked a lot of, education on nutrition. So it's about, are we making our kids eat differently now that could change the way their impulses are? Are we monitoring, their screen time? Also, just like, are we creating systems in the home that's going to help them function better. So with ADHD, you focus on executive functioning. So it's just about systems, just signs, just, all right, brush your teeth, put your clothes away, whatever it is. Just having those signs could make their, quality of life change. And it may help them not have to take any medication or make them at least show some difference in behavior without it.
Can I add something very quickly?
Yes.
That question made me think of, we social workers love to use certain words, and a big word we love to use is resistance. I don't like that word. I think, language is powerful. And when I talk about a resistant client or a problematic client or a hard to engage client, I'm putting everything on the client. It's a negative kind of terms and connotations on the client, which there then impacts how I approach the situation. Because here's this problematic client, this resistant client, this hard to engage client. And so I heard something a long time ago, I'm not sure who, so I want to give credit, I just don't remember who said it to me, that when you're talking about a resistant client, maybe they're not the ones that are resistant. Maybe I'm the one that's resistant.
Thank you.
Resistant to looking at this situation differently. Maybe I'm approaching this situation the way I've approached all my other situations, and it's not working. So the client's resistant? No, maybe I'm resistant. Maybe I don't want to take a step back and think that maybe I've made my initial assessment was wrong, my intervention, I'm not really listening to the client to hear what it is that they want and need. So what I would say to that question also is if the family doesn't want to do whatever it is we think they should be doing, maybe we need to take a step back and really listen to the client and think about something that the client can and will do and will engage in, because that right there is client-centered social work, and that's what we all want to be able to do.
Okay, thank you all so much. There are two questions here I want you all to kind of answer together, because what's the role of CPS in this case, and also the teacher's role? Two are very big systems, especially in New York City. So what's to tackle the CPS role of Kate being removed, and the teacher's role in terms of supporting Kate socially, emotionally? So those two kind of professionals. Durrell, you want to?
I'm sorry to be that guy, but I'm gonna be that guy.
Please do.
CPS started
Please
this
do.
trauma. CPS is a part of the trauma. They removed her from the family. And I wish I could be there to ask more, because I know this is a vignette, but there's thousands of Kates around the world. This is a real story, right? So I think CPS is that big cornerstone of this historical trauma that's continuing. And I think the role of the teachers honestly, that's a tough question, because it's are teachers equipped to I don't want to give them escape like an out, but it's why I feel like there needs to be a social worker in every school. Why I hate that social workers actually travel from school to school rather than being placed in the schools, because they're the counselors who are equipped to kind of understand what's going on. But I also think the teachers, sometimes, like you were saying, they just cascade off as a problematic student, rather than trying to get her the help that she needs, or understand maybe their methods isn't working. But then teachers sometimes are also bound by kind of curriculum that is outdated, curriculum that's not culturally sensitive, and then that's a one size fit all, and that doesn't always work. So,
So if I can just jump in. So I think that everything you said my colleague said is true, and I think that therefore that means that we need to look at systems. Right? How are CPS systems, children's services systems set up to support, not really, families and children, right? How are schools set up? I think this is the problem that I think we're having. And so again, I don't want to take responsibility away from where it needs to be. I think CPS workers, teachers, we were talking about the police before. These are all systems that are inherently racist and oppressive towards marginalized communities. And so I think that's where we need to look. We need CPS and we need schools, right? We need police officers. But the problem that we have is that these systems grew up and were created and developed in a time where racism was running rampant. And so it's still there. And so I think, we can talk about, what CPS workers really should be doing and what teachers and schools should be doing to help the families and children, but they can't do that if they're not set up to do that. And our schools and our educational systems, our healthcare systems, our juvenile justice systems, these systems are not set up to take care of people. And that is where we need to look to, and that's where we need social workers too. So just so y'all know.
So Melissa and then Kenald, and then we're gonna wrap up because we have another thing going on. But Melissa, yes.
I will say this. When we think of a body, our body has multiple parts. We have feet, we have hands, we have a head, we have a neck. When you all either are in those systems, are going to be a part of those systems. And oftentimes what I see from my social worker interns who are going into these systems are employees who are burnt out.
Yes.
They are experiencing vicarious trauma. They are experiencing a lack of productivity, or just simply have given up on the field. And so I want to implore all of you that don't give up. When the systems there are tensions related to those systems, when you have budgets that you need to work out, when you have deadlines that you need to work out, we are still working with people and not cattle.
Yes.
We are still working with people and not cattle. And if you need to slow down on the budget, if you have to say, pause, I need time to reflect. If you need to say, you know what? I'm going to continue to work with this client even past the time that we need to get them out of here. Do it.
Yes, yes.
Do it. Because that's important. We are not cattle.
Thank you. Kenald, last words.
I was a CPS worker, and it was very difficult being a CPS worker. I'll let you know that now. And that's because of the systems. When I worked, I chose to work in the neighborhood that I lived in, so my commute was only 5 minutes. But, I also was working with the people that I see every day. And I knew that when I go into someone's home, I don't need to be hiding if I'm in a supermarket because they see me. It's reached times where I was like in Labor Day Parkway and a client came running and giving me a hug and they're like, yo, who's that? I was like, I can't tell you. And then she was like, that's my CPS worker. And the thing about it is the CPS workers are there to do investigations. They're not there really to provide the support. So you have to understand the role of the CPS worker. And the CPS worker has to understand their role as well. So now if I see that there's a need for something, I have to have this, this healthy conversation with that parent, caretaker, even a child on, hey, look, I noticed this. If you continue this, it's going to lead you to that. Can we work on going here? And just being humanistic with them takes you a long way, and empathetic. It takes you a long way. Sticking to that, because they're going to come at you because that last experience they had is who they think you are. And when you show them something different, it takes you a long way. There's been times that a parent would curse me out and say, not you, just the ACS. And I'm like, I know, and then I help that parent reframe what they meant to say in a way that could be, digestible or received if they step into a family team conference, because then that's where it really counts. So, I would say just continue to be empathetic as you work. Also, take the time to use your resources that you share with them. Get a therapist to unpack, because if you're going to harbor everything in, it's going to really overwhelm you as well.
Thank you to our panelists for today. I'm going to just say two things: strength-based perspective and restoring humanity.
That's right.
That's it. Thank you for your time.